In the quiet hours of a summer evening, as the world buzzed with news of Cardinal Robert Prevost's historic election as Pope Leo XIII, the first American pope in the Catholic Church's 2,000-year history, an unexpected moment was about to unfold miles away in Los Angeles. Nobody could have predicted that one of Hollywood's most beloved actors would create a stir by simply mentioning the new pontiff's name. It happened during what was supposed to be a routine promotional live chat for Keanu Reeves' latest film. The actor, known for his roles in the Matrix series and the John Wick franchise, had joined an online interview that was being streamed to fans worldwide. Dressed in his typical casual style, a dark blazer over a plain t-shirt, his slightly long hair framing his face, Reeves appeared relaxed as he fielded questions about his new project. The filming was challenging but incredibly rewarding, Reeves was saying, his voice carrying that distinctive, thoughtful quality his fans had come to love. We spent about 4 months on location and the team really became like family. The interview was proceeding as expected, with questions about the film's stunts, the chemistry between cast members, and Reeves' preparation for the role. But about 20 minutes in, the conversation took an unexpected turn when the interviewer, a young woman with bright eyes and quick smile, asked what might have seemed like a throwaway question. "So Keanu, when you're not filming, what's been catching your attention lately? Any current events or stories that have resonated with you?" There was that slight pause that often preceded Reeves' responses, a moment where you could almost see him considering his words carefully. The chat's live comment section was filling with the usual fan messages, expressions of adoration, inside jokes about his films, and the occasional "you're breathtaking" reference. "Well," Reeves began, running a hand through his hair, "I've actually been following the news about the new Pope Robert Prevost, or Pope Leo XIV now. It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? The first American Pope." The comment itself seemed innocent enough, a simple observation about a historic event. But something in the way Reeves said it, with genuine interest, rather than merely making conversation, caught the interviewer's attention. "That's interesting," she replied, clearly not having expected the conversation to take this turn. "I wouldn't have guessed you followed Vatican news." A small smile played across Reeves's face. "I try to stay aware of significant moments in history, you know? And this feels like one of those watershed moments, the direction of something as ancient and influential as the Catholic Church, shifting in a new way." The live chat's comment section shifted instantly. "Did Keanu just bring up the Pope?" one viewer typed. "Is Keanu Catholic?" speculated another. The unexpected pivot from movie talk to papal discussion had caught everyone off guard. The interviewer, skilled at her job, leaned into this unexpected direction. "Do you have any particular thoughts about Pope Leo's election? It certainly has been making headlines." What happened next was what truly captured people's attention. Instead of offering a generic response or steering the conversation back to his film, Reeves seemed to become more engaged, sitting forward slightly in his chair. "I think what interests me most is his background," Reeves said, his expression thoughtful. "Here's someone who spent decades as a missionary in Peru, living among people facing real struggles before entering the church leadership. That kind of experience. It shapes your perspective in a way that's different from someone who's only known privilege." The live viewer count began to tick upward as word spread on social media that Keanu Reeves was discussing the new pope during what was supposed to be a movie promotion. Fans who had stepped away to grab snacks hurried back to their screens. Others who hadn't planned to watch the interview at all began tuning in. "I've read that he's focused on environmental issues and helping the marginalized," Reeves continued. "Those seem like the kind of priorities that could make a real difference, especially coming from someone in such an influential position." There was something about hearing these reflections from Reeves, an actor many knew primarily for his action roles, that was captivating. The contrast between his public persona and this thoughtful commentary created a compelling moment. The interviewer, recognizing the unusual territory they had entered, pressed gently. "It sounds like you've been following his statements pretty closely. Is there a particular reason the new pope has caught your interest?" Reeves glanced away from the camera briefly as if gathering his thoughts. When he looked back, there was something in his expression that hadn't been there before. A hint of personal connection that made viewers lean closer to their screens. "I actually had a chance encounter with him years ago," Reeves said quietly, "back when he was just Cardinal Prevost." The chat exploded with comments. The interviewer's eyes widened slightly. "This was, I think, around 2018, Reeves continued. "I was in Peru scouting locations for a potential project that ultimately didn't come together. My guide took me to this small community center where a group was working with local families. I didn't know who he was at the time. Just this American man in simple clothes sitting on the floor playing a game with some kids." As Reeves spoke, viewers could almost picture the scene. The dusty community center, the laughter of children, and the future pope, not yet elevated to his current position, simply being present with the people he served. "We only spoke briefly," Reeves explained, "but something he said stuck with me. We were discussing the challenges the community was facing, and he told me, the real work isn't building structures, it's building bridges between people." It wasn't profound in a complicated way, but there was this authenticity to it. The interviewer, clearly fascinated, had completely abandoned her prepared questions. "And now that same person is leading the Catholic Church. That's quite a connection to have." Reeves nodded, a slight smile crossing his face. "It's strange how life works sometimes. You meet someone briefly and years later you realize they've stepped into this massive historical role. I'm not Catholic myself, but I find myself interested in what he might do, having known the kinds of communities he worked with." What made the moment especially powerful was the genuineness of Reeves's reflection. There was no sense that he was trying to make a statement or position himself politically. It was simply a human connection to a global event, the kind of unexpected perspective that makes people stop and reconsider their own preconceptions. "Do you think that experience shaped his approach to leadership?" the interviewer asked, now fully invested in this unexpected conversation. "I would imagine it has to," Reeves replied. "When you've spent time with people who are struggling with real poverty, real challenges, it has to change how you see your responsibilities. From what I've read about his first decisions as Pope, he seems to be carrying that perspective forward." The live stream's viewer count had nearly doubled by this point. Social media was lighting up with clips of the exchange, many viewers expressing surprise and interest in this unexpected side of the actor. As Reeves continued sharing his thoughts, the promotional chat had transformed into something far more meaningful than anyone had anticipated. In a media landscape often dominated by carefully scripted interactions and predictable celebrity comments, this authentic moment of reflection stood out vividly. "I think what resonates with me," Reeves said, "is the idea that even in positions of traditional power there can be voices that speak for those who aren't usually heard. That's something worth paying attention to, regardless of your own beliefs." The interviewer nodded, visibly moved by the unexpected depth of the conversation. "That's a really thoughtful perspective, Keanu. I think a lot of people wouldn't have expected this conversation when they tuned in today." Reeves gave that characteristic small laugh of his, slightly self-conscious but genuine. "Yeah, sorry about that. Didn't mean to derail your questions about the movie." "Not at all," the interviewer assured him. "I think this is why people connect with you, these unexpected moments of authenticity." As the conversation eventually returned to the film promotion, something had shifted in the atmosphere of the interview. The comment section continued to buzz with reactions to Reeves's unexpected papal discussion. Viewers who had tuned in expecting typical Hollywood talk had instead witnessed a moment of genuine human connection to world events. What nobody knew yet was how far this moment would travel, or the ripples it would create as it reached the Vatican itself. By morning, clips of the exchange would be circulating globally, sparking conversations about celebrity influence, religious leadership, and the power of unexpected personal connections across different worlds. As dawn broke the morning after Keanu Reeves's surprising live chat, clips of his conversation about Pope Leo XIV had already gone viral. Coffee shops buzzed with discussions, phone screens lit up with notifications, and news outlets scrambled to pick up the story. What had started as a routine promotional interview had transformed into something far more intriguing, a rare glimpse into the personal thoughts of one of Hollywood's most private stars. Did you see that Keanu Reeves video? Became the opening line of countless conversations. People who had never paid attention to Vatican news were suddenly interested in learning more about Robert Prevost, the American cardinal who had become Pope Leo XIV just 3 months earlier. In his apartment, overlooking the Pacific, Keanu woke to a flood of messages from his agent, publicist, and friends. His phone buzzed continuously as he made his morning coffee, watching the waves roll in through the large windows. He hadn't expected his casual mention of the Pope to create such a stir. Scanning through the headlines on his tablet, he shook his head with a mixture of amusement and mild concern. Keanu Reeves reveals surprising connection to new Pope, read one headline. Hollywood star's spiritual side shocks fans, declared another. Some reports were already speculating about Reeves's religious beliefs, despite him clearly stating in the interview that he wasn't Catholic. His publicist had left 3 voicemails, each more urgent than the last. "We're getting calls from everyone," she said in the most recent one. "Religious publications, major networks, even the Vatican press office has reached out for clarification on your comments. Call me as soon as you can." Keanu sighed, running a hand through his sleep-tousled hair. He had spoken honestly about a brief but meaningful encounter, and somehow it had turned into the biggest story of the week. Such was the nature of celebrity. Even the most innocent comments could take on a life of their own. Across the world in Vatican City, Pope Leo XIV was finishing his morning prayers when his secretary knocked gently on the door of his private chapel. The new pontiff, still adjusting to the weight of his position, looked up with kind eyes that carried the wisdom of his 69 years. "Your Holiness," the secretary said with a slight bow, "there's something you may wish to see. The American actor Keanu Reeves has mentioned you in an interview. It's receiving considerable attention." The Pope's eyebrows lifted in surprise.
"Keanu Reeves, the actor?" A smile touched his lips. "Now that's unexpected."
In his office, on a tablet that seemed out of place against the centuries-old desk, Pope Leo watched the clip of Keanu describing their meeting in Peru. As the actor spoke about the community center and the children's games, a look of recognition dawned on the pontiff's face. "I remember him," he said softly to his secretary. "I didn't make the connection at the time. He wasn't dressed like a movie star, just a visitor in simple clothes. We spoke about the water filtration project." He chuckled warmly. "He helped me set up chairs for a community meeting." The Pope leaned back in his chair, looking thoughtful. How interesting that he would remember such a brief encounter, and that comment about building bridges between people. He nodded slowly. "Those words have guided much of my work." By midday, news outlets were reporting that sources close to the Vatican had confirmed the meeting between Reeves and the future Pope had indeed taken place. This verification only fueled further interest in the story. Social media platforms were flooded with people sharing their own stories of unexpected encounters that had left lasting impressions on their lives. In Los Angeles, Keanu finally returned his publicist's calls. Their conversation was brief but decisive. "Everyone wants a follow-up interview," she told him. "This could be huge publicity for the film if we play it right." But Keanu was firm. "I've said what I wanted to say. I don't want to turn this into a promotional strategy." His voice was gentle, but resolute. "That wouldn't be right." His publicist sighed. "That's so you." There was both frustration and affection in her tone. "I'll tell them you have no further comment, but the press conference for the film next week, you know they'll ask about this." "I'll handle it," Keanu assured her. Meanwhile, in a small cafe near the community center in Lima, Peru, where the encounter had taken place years earlier, a group of local residents gathered around a smartphone, watching the interview with amazed expressions. They recognized their center, their neighborhood. In Reeves's description, "I remember when that American cardinal used to come here," said an older woman, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug. "He would sit on that old blue mat and play with the children for hours. No one would have guessed he would become Pope. And the famous actor was here too," added a younger man, shaking his head in wonder. "Our little community connected to such big names, The center's director, who had worked alongside Cardinal Prevost for years before his elevation to the papacy, smiled thoughtfully. What strikes me is what Keanu Reeves took away from his visit. Not the poverty or the challenges, but the humanity and connection. That says something about him as a person. As evening approached in Rome, Pope Leo XIV sat at his desk, pen in hand. Before him was a sheet of paper bearing the papal letterhead. He had dismissed his secretary, preferring to write this particular note himself. After a moment's reflection, he began to write in his neat, precise handwriting. Dear Mr. Reeves, your recent comments brought back a pleasant memory of our brief meeting in Peru. I was touched to learn that our conversation about building bridges between people remained with you, as the spirit of that idea has guided much of my life's work. The Pope continued writing, expressing his appreciation for Reeves bringing attention to the communities in Peru that still needed support. He ended with an invitation, not a formal papal audience with all its ceremony, but a simple offer to continue their conversation should Reeves ever find himself in Rome. As the story continued to spread, something unexpected began to happen. Beyond the celebrity gossip and religious speculation, people started engaging with the actual substance of what Reeves had mentioned. The Pope's background working with marginalized communities and his emphasis on environmental concerns. News programs that might never have covered papal policy began discussing Pope Leo's recent statements on climate change and economic inequality. Donations to several Peruvian community organizations increased dramatically as people researched the work that had been done there. A spotlight had suddenly been cast on humanitarian efforts that usually received little attention from mainstream media. For Keanu, the frenzy was both puzzling and slightly overwhelming. During his morning motorcycle ride along the coast, his preferred way to clear his head, he pulled over at a scenic overlook. Removing his helmet, he gazed out at the vast Pacific, reflecting on the strange turns life could take. A simple comment, a remembered encounter, and somehow it had sparked conversations across the world. He thought about the small community center in Peru, wondering if the children he had seen playing there were now teenagers. He thought about the future pope, sitting cross-legged on the floor, speaking quietly about building bridges between people. Some encounters, however brief, leave marks on our souls that we don't fully understand until years later. Some connections, made in passing, can resurface in unexpected ways that remind us how interwoven all our stories truly are. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the water, Keanu received an email from his agent. Among the business correspondences and interview requests was a message forwarded from the Vatican. Seeing the official address, he paused before opening it, wondering what formal response the Catholic Church might have to his comments. When he read Pope Leo's personal note, a smile spread across his face. There was no religious agenda, no formal statement, just one person reaching out to another, acknowledging a human connection that had spanned years and continents. As Keanu put his phone away and started his motorcycle again, he felt a sense of quiet satisfaction. In a world that often seemed divided and disconnected, sometimes the most meaningful bridges were built in the most unexpected ways. And sometimes, the most important connections weren't the ones broadcast to millions, but the authentic moments of understanding that passed between two people, regardless of their different paths in life. Back in his hotel room later that evening, Keanu drafted a simple reply to the Pope's message. No publicists, no press releases, just a genuine response acknowledging the strange coincidence that had brought their paths together once again. As he typed the final words and hit send, he wondered what further ripples this unusual connection might create. What neither he nor Pope Leo could have anticipated was how their exchange would inspire others to reflect on their own unexpected encounters and the bridges they had built, or neglected to build, in their own lives. Sometimes the most powerful stories aren't about celebrities or world leaders at all, but about the simple human connections that remind us of our shared journey. The morning sunlight streamed through the windows of Keanu's hotel room as he prepared for the press conference. It had been a week since his unexpected mention of Pope Leo XIV had captured global attention, and today he would face a room full of journalists eager to ask about anything except his new film. He straightened his dark tie and took a deep breath, mentally preparing for the questions he knew were coming. His phone buzzed with a message from his co-star, "Ready for the Pope paparazzi?" followed by a laughing emoji. He smiled, despite his nervousness. At least someone was finding humor in the situation. Downstairs in the hotel conference room, reporters from entertainment outlets mingled with journalists from religious publications. The unusual mix reflected how Keanu's comments had bridged two worlds that rarely intersected. Camera crews adjusted their equipment while photographers checked their settings. The publicist for the film paced nervously, glancing at her watch. "Remember, we're here to talk about the movie," she reminded the gathering press, though her tone suggested she knew this was a hopeless request. "Please keep your questions focused on the film." A murmur of polite agreement rippled through the crowd, but nobody believed it. The story had grown too big. What had begun as a simple mention during a live chat had evolved into something more meaningful, a conversation about the unexpected connections that shape our lives and the impact of genuine human encounters in a world of carefully crafted, public images. When Keanu entered alongside his castmates, the room fell momentarily silent before erupting in camera clicks and murmured comments. He took his seat at the center of the long table, nodding greeting to the assembled press. After brief introductions, the questions began. As expected, it took less than 3 minutes for the first journalist to raise her hand and ask, "Your comments about Pope Leo XIII have sparked global interest. Can you tell us more about your experience meeting him years ago in Peru?" The publicist sighed audibly, but Keanu leaned forward slightly, his expression thoughtful. "I think what's interesting isn't really about me or even about the Pope specifically," he began, his voice carrying that distinctive, gentle quality that made people lean in to listen. "It's about how sometimes small moments with strangers can stick with us in unexpected ways." He paused, gathering his thoughts. The room was completely silent. "When I met Cardinal Prevost, as he was then, in that community center, it wasn't a big moment. We didn't have some profound philosophical discussion. He was just someone doing good work in a place that needed it. What stood out was his presence with the people there. He wasn't separate from them. He was among them." A reporter from a Catholic newspaper raised his hand. "The Vatican has confirmed your meeting took place. Have you had any communication with Pope Leo since your interview went viral?" Keanu hesitated. The personal note from the Pope felt private, not something for public consumption. "We've had some communication," he acknowledged simply. "It was nice to reconnect after all these years." "Is it true you've been invited to the Vatican?" called out another journalist. "Let's keep our focus on the film," the publicist interjected, but Keanu held up a hand gently. "I appreciate everyone's interest, but I think we might be missing something important here," he said. "This story has gotten a lot of attention because it involves a pope and an actor, but the real story worth telling is about the work being done in communities like the one where we met. There are people dedicated to making life better for others who never make headlines." There was a brief silence as the journalists considered his redirection. Then a young reporter in the back raised her hand. "Can you tell us more about what impressed you about the Pope's message? You mentioned his focus on the environment and helping marginalized people. What specifically resonates with you about that approach?" It was the first question that seemed genuinely interested in the substance behind the viral moment. Keanu's expression softened. "I think what resonates with me is the idea that we share this world," he said, speaking more freely now. "We share the air, the water, the future. When someone in a position of influence talks about our responsibility to each other and to the planet, that feels important, especially now." He continued, his words measured but heartfelt. "In the community where I met him, people were facing real challenges with water quality and access to health care. These weren't abstract problems. They were affecting children's lives every day. The fact that someone who worked directly with those communities is now in a position to address these issues on a global scale, that feels meaningful." As he spoke, something shifted in the room. The hunger for celebrity gossip began to give way to genuine engagement with the ideas he was expressing. Journalists who had come for a sensational story found themselves taking Notes about environmental justice and the economic inequality instead. Is this something you've been passionate about for a long time? Asked another reporter. These social issues? Keanu nodded slowly.
I think most of us care about these things when we allow ourselves to really see them. My work has taken me to many different places around the world. You notice patterns, who's suffering, who's thriving, what systems are working, and what systems are failing people.
He glanced down at his hands for a moment before continuing. I'm not an expert on any of this, I'm just someone who's had the privilege to travel and observe. But I think we all have a responsibility to pay attention and to care. Outside the hotel, a small crowd had gathered. What was unusual wasn't their presence. Fans often appeared at press events, but their composition. Among the usual film enthusiasts were people holding signs about climate action and economic justice. The conversation that had begun with Keanu's casual mention of the Pope had evolved into something broader. Across the Atlantic, Pope Leo XIV was addressing a gathering of environmental scientists at a Vatican conference. The event had been scheduled months before he became Pope, but it had taken on new significance in light of his recent elevation. Our call to care for our common home is not merely a political position, the Pope was saying, his voice carrying through the historic hall. It is a moral imperative that transcends borders, economies, and even religious differences. A reporter, who had attended Keanu's press conference earlier that day, having flown overnight to make both events, noticed the parallel in their messages. Despite their vastly different roles and backgrounds, both men were speaking about shared responsibility and connection. Later that evening, as Keanu returned to his hotel room, exhausted from hours of questions, he found a small package waiting for him. Opening it carefully, he discovered a handcrafted bracelet made of simple wooden beads with a small note. Made by the children at the Lima Community Center. They're proud of their connection to you and Pope Leo. Thank you for remembering us. He slipped the bracelet onto his wrist, touched by the gesture. On his phone, news alerts continued to pop up about his press conference, but the headlines had shifted. Instead of focusing on the celebrity-papal connection, they were highlighting his comments about environmental responsibility and support for marginalized communities. Actor Keanu Reeves highlights global inequality during film press conference and read one headline. Hollywood star and Pope find common ground on climate action, declared another. What had started as a viral moment was transforming into a substantive conversation. People who would never have engaged with papal encyclicals were now discussing Catholic social teaching on environmental stewardship. Others who rarely paid attention to celebrity news were learning about Keanu's long history of quiet philanthropy. In a small office at the community center in Lima, the director was overwhelmed with emails and phone calls. News outlets wanted information about their programs. Potential donors were reaching out about supporting their work. What had been a struggling local initiative was suddenly receiving global attention because of an unexpected connection between two seemingly different worlds. We never imagined this would happen, she told her staff, tears of gratitude in her eyes. All those years of work, often feeling like nobody was paying attention, and now this. As night fell over Rome, Pope Leo sat in his private study, reading reports about the day's environmental conference. On his desk was a newspaper featuring Keanu's comments at the press conference. He smiled at the unexpected parallels in their messages delivered an ocean apart. He picked up his pen and began writing notes for his upcoming address on global solidarity. The media storm around Keanu's mention of their meeting would eventually fade, as all news stories do. But perhaps something more lasting would remain, a conversation about how we connect with one another across differences, how brief encounters can leave lasting impressions, and how our shared concerns for this world might bridge even the widest divides. In Los Angeles, Keanu's publicist was on the phone with a major news magazine. Yes, he's interested in discussing environmental initiatives, but he wants the focus to be on the organizations doing the work, not on him, she explained. And yes, he'd be willing to share more about his meeting with the Pope, but only in the context of highlighting the community work being done in Peru. She listened for a moment, then smiled. No, that's exactly what he wants. for this to become a conversation about something bigger than a celebrity anecdote. As she hung up, she shook her head in amazement. In all her years working in Hollywood, she'd never seen a publicity moment pivot so completely from celebrity gossip to substantive discussion. It was as if people had been hungry for something more meaningful all along. In his hotel room, Keanu stood by the window, looking out at the city lights. He fingered the wooden bracelet from the children in Lima, thinking about how strangely life could unfold. A chance meeting years ago, a casual comment in an interview, and somehow it had opened doors for people whose voices often went unheard. He thought about the note from Pope Leo, with its invitation to continue their conversation in Rome. Perhaps there was something valuable in that connection, not because of who they were, but because of what they both cared about. Different paths, different worlds, but a shared concern for this fragile planet and its people. Sometimes the most unexpected bridges are the ones that matter most, and sometimes the most powerful messages come not from carefully crafted statements, but from authentic moments of human connection that remind us of our shared journey on this earth. The video had been viewed over 15 million times in just 3 days. It wasn't from Keanu's original interview or the press conference, it was something entirely unexpected. A 12-year-old boy from the Lima Community Center had recorded a simple message on his mother's phone, speaking directly to the camera with the earnestness only children can truly manage. "My name is Carlos," the boy said in careful English. "This is where Keanu Reeves met Pope Leo many years ago." He gestured behind him to a humble building with peeling blue paint. "Before Pope Leo was Pope, he helped us build this water filter system." The camera panned shakily to show pipes and filtration tanks. "Now people want to know about our community because of the famous actor and the Pope, but we have been here all along." The video continued as Carlos showed viewers around the center, introducing other children and the dedicated staff who worked there. What had captured people's hearts wasn't celebrity gossip, but the genuine pride these children took in their community and the work being done there. Keanu watched it on his phone during a break in filming, sitting alone in his trailer. The simple honesty of Carlos's tour moved him deeply. This was what mattered, not the viral story about him and the Pope, but the real people at the heart of it. His co-star knocked on the trailer door, popping her head in. "They're ready for us on set," she said, then noticed his expression. "Everything okay?" Keanu nodded, showing her the video. "Just getting some perspective," he said quietly. On the other side of the world, Pope Leo XIV was being briefed by his communications team about the growing movement that had sprung up in the wake of the Keanu connection. "It's remarkable, Your Holiness," his young media advisor explained, scrolling through data on a tablet. "We're seeing engagement with your environmental encyclical from demographics that have never previously shown interest in papal statements. Downloads are up 600% since the story broke." The Pope listened thoughtfully, his hands folded in his lap. "And the community centers? Has there been any tangible benefit to them?" "Absolutely," the advisor confirmed. "The Lima Center has received enough donations to fund their operations for the next 3 years, and it's spreading to similar initiatives in other regions. People are asking how they can support programs in their own communities." Pope Leo nodded, a slight smile crossing his weathered face. "Then something good has come from all this attention." "There's something else, Your Holiness," the advisor added. "Mr. Reeves has agreed to a joint interview with you for World Environment Day next month. Not about your personal connection, though that would be mentioned, but focused on the work being done in communities like Lima and how ordinary people can get involved." The Pope raised his eyebrows. "A joint interview? That would be unprecedented." "Completely," the advisor agreed. "No pope has ever participated in something like this with a Hollywood actor. Some of the more traditional cardinals have expressed concerns." "I imagine they have," Pope Leo said, with a gentle chuckle. "What do you advise?" The young advisor hesitated. "From a communication standpoint, it's an extraordinary opportunity to reach people who would never otherwise engage with the Church's teachings on environmental stewardship. But ultimately, it's your decision, Your Holiness." The Pope was quiet for a moment, thinking of the community center in Peru, of the children he had worked with there, of the brief encounter with a thoughtful actor who had remembered his words years later. Sometimes the most important work happened outside traditional channels. Let's do it, he said finally. But let's make sure it serves the communities we're discussing, not just our own interests. 2 weeks later, Keanu found himself in a recording studio in Los Angeles, facing a large screen where Pope Leo would appear via video link from the Vatican. The setup was simple: 2 chairs, professional lighting, and a moderator who would guide their conversation. No audience, no fanfare, just a focused discussion about environmental action and community support. As the technical team made final adjustments, Keanu felt an unexpected nervousness. He'd faced cameras countless times in his career, but this felt different. This wasn't about promoting a film or playing a character, this was about something real. "We're live in 5 minutes," the producer called. On the screen, the Vatican feed came to life. Pope Leo sat in a simple chair, wearing his white papal garments but with minimal ceremonial elements. Behind him was not an elaborate Vatican backdrop, but a photo of the Lima Community Center. Their eyes met through the screen and the Pope smiled warmly. "Mr. Reeves," he said in lightly accented English, "it seems our paths continue to cross in unexpected ways." Keanu nodded, returning the smile. "Life has strange patterns sometimes, Your Holiness." The formal interview hadn't begun yet. This was just a moment for them to connect before the cameras officially started rolling. But something about the genuine warmth of this brief exchange set the tone for what would follow. When the moderator began the official broadcast, introducing the unusual pairing to viewers around the world, there was none of the awkwardness that might have been expected. Instead, what unfolded was a thoughtful conversation between 2 people who, despite their vastly different life paths, shared a common concern for the planet and its people. "When I visited communities like Lima," Pope Leo explained, "I saw firsthand how environmental challenges are really human challenges. Water quality affects children's health and education. Sustainable agriculture impacts family stability." Keanu nodded. "I've seen similar patterns in different parts of the world. These aren't abstract problems, they're affecting real people every day." As the conversation continued, viewers around the world were struck by how naturally these 2 public figures from completely different spheres engaged with one another. There was no sense of performance, no political posturing, just authentic dialogue about matters of genuine importance. "What gives me hope," the Pope said at one point, "is seeing young people like Carlos and his friends at the community center taking ownership of these issues. They understand better than many of us that these challenges belong to all of us." "I saw the video he made," Keanu mentioned. There was so much pride in his voice when he showed what they'd built together. The Pope's eyes crinkled with a smile. "Carlos was just 5 years old when we installed that water system. He used to follow the engineers around asking endless questions. Now he wants to become an environmental engineer himself." The conversation shifted to practical ways that ordinary people could support community initiatives around the world. Both men emphasized local action and personal responsibility, with the Pope highlighting the moral dimension and Keanu focusing on individual choices and support for grassroots organizations. What viewers couldn't see was what happened during a brief technical glitch when the broadcast was temporarily paused. While technicians scrambled to fix the issue, Keanu and Pope Leo continued their conversation off-air. "I've been meaning to ask," Keanu said with genuine curiosity. "Does it feel different? Being Pope versus working directly with communities?" The older man considered the question thoughtfully. "There are days when I miss the simplicity of sitting on the floor playing games with children," he admitted. "The role comes with tremendous responsibility and distance, but it also offers the possibility of amplifying important messages." He smiled slightly. "Much like your position as an actor, perhaps?" Keanu nodded, understanding the parallel. Different platforms, but similar tensions between public role and personal connection. "Exactly," the Pope agreed. "We're both in our ways, bridges between different worlds." When the broadcast resumed, viewers noticed a subtle shift, an even deeper level of mutual respect and understanding between the 2 men. What had begun as an unusual pairing for a cause-focused interview had evolved into something more meaningful. a model of how authentic conversation across different perspectives could open new possibilities. As the interview concluded, social media exploded with reactions. The hashtags Bridging Worlds and Keanu Meets Leo trended globally. But what was most remarkable wasn't just the volume of engagement, but its substance. People weren't simply reacting to the novelty of an actor and a pope in conversation. They were sharing resources about environmental initiatives and community support programs. The Lima Community Center's website crashed from the traffic as people around the world sought information about their model and how it might be implemented elsewhere. Environmental organizations reported unprecedented levels of new volunteers signing up. Religious leaders from various traditions issued statements supporting the call for united action on climate issues. In his hotel room that evening, Keanu scrolled through some of the responses, moved by how many people seemed genuinely inspired to get involved. His phone rang. It was his agent. That was something else, the agent said, sounding slightly bewildered. I've been doing this job for 25 years, and I've never seen anything quite like it. We've got offers coming in for every environmental, documentary, and social impact project out there. Not interested, Keanu replied simply. This wasn't about finding new projects. Then what was it about? His agent asked, genuinely curious. Keanu thought for a moment. Building bridges, he said finally. Just like he told me years ago, building bridges between people. At the Vatican, Pope Leo was preparing for evening prayers when his secretary delivered a small package that had arrived from Los Angeles. Inside was a handcrafted wooden box containing samples of seeds from community gardens around the world with a simple note. Different seeds, same earth. Thank you for the conversation. KR, the Pope smiled, placing the box carefully on his desk. From a chance meeting in Peru to a global conversation about our shared responsibility for each other and the planet, it was a reminder that connections, formed in unexpected moments, could grow into something powerful when nurtured with authenticity and shared purpose. That night, as millions of people around the world reflected on what they'd witnessed, something subtle but significant had shifted in the cultural conversation, beyond celebrity gossip, beyond religious divisions, beyond political polarization. A space had opened for something more genuine, a recognition of our common humanity and shared home on this fragile planet. And in Lima, 12-year-old Carlos fell asleep, dreaming of water systems and environmental engineering, unaware that his simple video had helped inspire people around the world to look beyond the famous names to the real work being done in communities like his own. 6 months had passed since the unlikely connection between Keanu Reeves and Pope Leo XIV had captured global attention. The media frenzy had eventually died down, as it always does, but something more lasting had taken root in its place. What had begun as a casual mention during a promotional interview had blossomed into a movement that neither man could have anticipated. On a crisp autumn morning, Keanu stepped off a small plane onto the airstrip outside Lima, Peru. He wore simple clothes, jeans, a black t-shirt, and a well-worn jacket, and carried just one bag. No film crew accompanied him, no publicist managed his schedule. This wasn't a publicity tour or a film location scout. This was personal. A battered pickup truck waited nearby, driven by the director of the community center he had mentioned all those months ago. They greeted each other with the warmth of people connected by something meaningful, though they had met in person only once before. The children are so excited, the director said as they drove through the dusty roads leading away from Lima. We told them only yesterday that you were coming. We wanted to keep it quiet. Keanu nodded appreciatively. Thank you for that. And how are things at the center? The director's face lit up. You won't recognize it. Everything has changed since... She paused, still amazed by the chain of events. Since you mentioned us. The landscape outside the truck windows gradually changed from urban sprawl to smaller communities nestled in the foothills. Children played in yards, women chatted while hanging laundry, men repaired motorbikes under the shade of trees. This was the Peru tourists rarely saw, not the postcard Machu Picchu or colonial Lima, but the everyday reality where most Peruvians lived their lives. As they rounded a bend in the road, the community center came into view. Keanu's eyes widened in surprise. The once humble building with its peeling blue paint had been transformed. Solar panels gleamed on the roof. A large garden flourished behind a new fence. A water tower rose beside the building, bearing a colorful mural painted by local children. "This is amazing," he said quietly. The director smiled proudly. "All from the attention and donations after your interview. But the best changes are inside." And they pulled up to the center. Keanu noticed a small group waiting by the entrance. Not a crowd of fans or reporters, but about a dozen people who clearly had official roles at the center. They greeted him with handshakes and warm smiles, but without the fuss of celebrity treatment. "We want to show you everything before the children's program this afternoon," explained a young woman who introduced herself as the new environmental education coordinator. For the next hour, Keanu toured the transformed center. What had once been a simple community gathering space with basic services had evolved into a comprehensive support center with educational programs, healthcare services, and environmental initiatives. The water filtration system, the very one Cardinal Prevost had helped install years ago, had been expanded to serve neighboring communities as well. In one room, teenagers learned computer skills on new laptops. In another, mothers attended a workshop on sustainable cooking practices. Outside in the flourishing garden, younger children tended carefully labeled vegetable plots. "And this," said the director, opening the door to what had once been a storage closet, "is our communication center." Inside was a simple but effective recording studio with basic video equipment and sound insulation made from recycled materials. On the wall hung a framed screenshot from Carlos's viral video, the one that had shown the world their community after Keanu's mention of the Pope. "Carlos has been making weekly videos about our environmental projects," the director explained. "They've become quite popular. Several other community centers around the country have started similar programs after seeing what we're doing here." Keanu smiled at the thought of the 12-year-old influencer. "Is he here today?" "He'll be leading the afternoon presentation," the director said with a proud nod. "He's been practicing all week." As they continued the tour, Keanu asked thoughtful questions about the programs and the people they served. He wasn't just going through the motions, he genuinely wanted to understand the impact of the work being done here. Occasionally, he'd share observations from similar initiatives he had encountered in other parts of the world, always careful to listen more than he spoke. During a brief break as they sat drinking fresh fruit juice in the center's small kitchen, the director handed him an envelope. "This arrived for you yesterday," she said. "From Rome." Keanu recognized the simple but distinctive Vatican letterhead. Opening it carefully, he found a handwritten note from Pope Leo XIV. "My dear friend, though I cannot join you in Peru, my heart is with you and with the community that connects us. The seeds we planted years ago have grown in ways neither of us could have imagined. The work being done there reminds us that the most powerful changes often begin in the smallest places. Please extend my warmest greetings to Carlos and all the children. They are the true bridge builders for our future. With gratitude for your continued commitment, Leo XIV." Keanu folded the note carefully, touched by the personal message. The Pope had been scheduled to visit the center as well, marking his first return to Peru since becoming pontiff, but a health concern had forced him to postpone the trip. Still, his presence was felt throughout the renovated center, in the photos of his earlier work there, and in the values that guided their programs. Early afternoon, the center buzzed with excitement as children and families arrived for the special program. They gathered in the newly constructed multi-purpose room, sitting on colorful benches made from recycled materials. At the front stood a small stage decorated with plants and student artwork. When Keanu entered, there was a moment of hushed awe, followed by enthusiastic applause. He took a seat in the front row, not as a VIP but as an honored guest among equals. Carlos, now 13 and noticeably taller than in his viral video, stepped onto the stage with impressive confidence. He wore a crisp white shirt with the community center's new logo, a water droplet surrounding a seedling. "Welcome, everyone," he began in Spanish. then switched to English with a nod to Keanu. Today we celebrate connections between our community and the world, between environmental health and human well-being, between past work and future dreams. What followed was a presentation that would have impressed professional event planners. Children of various ages showcased their environmental projects through songs, short plays, and demonstrations. Teenagers presented data on the impact of their water conservation efforts. Mothers displayed crafts made from recycled materials that they now sold online to buyers around the world. Throughout it all, Carlos narrated with the natural ease of someone born to communicate. When technical difficulties briefly interrupted a video presentation, he filled the time with impromptu questions to Keanu about his own environmental practices, displaying the quick thinking of a seasoned host. When invited to speak, Keanu kept his comments brief and heartfelt. He thanked the community for welcoming him and expressed his admiration for what they had accomplished. "What I see here today isn't just impressive because of the new buildings or programs," he said, his voice gentle but carrying clearly through the room. "It's impressive because of the spirit behind it all. You've taken opportunity and turned it into something that belongs to you, something that reflects your values and vision." The children beamed with pride. This wasn't charity being bestowed by a wealthy foreigner. It was recognition of their own agency and accomplishments. After the formal program, as the gathering transitioned to a community meal shared in the garden, Keanu found a moment to speak privately with Carlos. The boy who had created the viral video was helping younger children fill their plates with food grown in their own garden. "Your presentation was excellent," Keanu told him. "You have a real gift for communication." Carlos smiled, a mix of shyness and pride on his face. "I want to study environmental engineering and communication," he said, "to help people understand why these projects matter." "That's a powerful combination," Keanu nodded. "The technical knowledge and the ability to share it effectively." Carlos hesitated, then asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. "Is it true that you and the Pope are working on a new project together?" Keanu smiled. The news hadn't been officially announced yet, but rumors had been circulating for weeks. "We're developing an international youth environmental leadership program," he confirmed, "supporting young people like you who want to make a difference in their communities." Carlos's eyes widened. "Will it include students from Peru?" "It will include students from everywhere," Keanu assured him. "And yes, this community center will be one of our partner locations." The joy on Carlos's face reflected something bigger than personal opportunity. It was the recognition that their small community had become part of a global conversation, that their work mattered beyond their own boundaries. As evening approached, and lanterns were lit in the garden, casting a warm glow over the continuing celebrations, Keanu found a quiet moment to call the Vatican. Despite the time difference, Pope Leo had asked to hear about the day's events. "The transformation is remarkable," Keanu told him, sitting on a bench beneath a star-filled Peruvian sky. "But what stands out most is how they've made it their own. This isn't about us. It's fully theirs. That's the only kind of change that lasts," the Pope replied, his voice warm despite the miles between them, "the kind that takes root in the community itself." They spoke briefly about the upcoming launch of their joint initiative, then about the simple human moments that had made the day special. A young girl proudly showing off the tomatoes she had grown, an elderly man teaching traditional sustainable farming techniques to university students, Carlos confidently fielding questions about their solar power system. As they ended the call, Pope Leo said something that stayed with Keanu long after. "Sometimes the most important thing we can do is simply to notice each other, across all the boundaries that seem to separate us, and recognize our common humanity." Later that night, as the community celebration wound down and families headed home with leftover food from the feast, Keanu helped the staff clean up the garden area. He worked alongside teenagers and grandmothers, passing plates and folding tables, just another pair of hands in the communal effort. One of the older women, watching him wipe down tables without any celebrity pretense, nodded approvingly and said something in Spanish to her friend. The director, overhearing, translated for Keanu. "She says you and the Pope have something in common. You both understand that real connection happens when you put down the microphone and pick up the broom. Keanu smiled, recognizing the profound truth in her simple observation. In a world often divided by fame, power, wealth, and ideology, the most meaningful bridges were built through genuine presence and shared purpose. As he looked around at the thriving community center, at the children's garden illuminated by solar-powered lights, at the mural depicting local and global environmental connections, at the faces of people who had turned unexpected attention into lasting positive change, he felt a sense of peace that no Hollywood premiere could ever match. What had begun, with a casual mention during a live chat, had evolved into something authentic and enduring. A reminder that our most powerful stories aren't about celebrities or world leaders, but about our shared humanity and common home on this fragile, beautiful planet.